Welcome back for another episode, the final episode of season 3. Let's take a moment to just kind of soak that in too. As I said it was kind of humbling, right? So 3 seasons, 3 different books that we've walked through, which is kind of cool. You know, it's really cool to think about and reflect on. And again, just kind of thankful for y'all, thankful for everybody engaging the conversation. Because I love the themes that we see through all of them that kind of connect. But just the idea of how much the next generation needs adults that care about this kind of stuff just makes me feel really, really awesome. And here we are with 3 big questions that change every teenager. I always just call it 3 big questions, but it is the full title. In chapter 10, which is we've had the conversations about identity, purpose, and belonging, and now it's time to turn the corner into just the way they choose to summarize, which I think is pretty interesting, conversations and connections in tough times. So very much like trying to hone in on when challenging things come the way of teenagers, which they do. Those are inevitable. What do you do? So I hope that all those listening are kind of thinking about that. When you think about your young person's life, right? Whether that's you're a mentor, a parent, a grandparent, or anything like that. Like as we have all experienced our own tough times, what do we do? How do we have conversations? And what are the questions that kind of help to guide those conversations as we go through? And the chapter kind of started in such an interesting way because they started writing before the pandemic, and it just started talking about disruption. And let's just talk about that word to start with, because I thought it was a very interesting word in general. But I like it. I kind of like it for the when you think about tough times, why there's such a struggle is because of disruption. What did you guys think about that use?
Yeah, I think disruption can mean a whole bunch of different things. They used several different examples. The pandemic disrupted just about every norm that we've got. But it could be really anything, whether it be like a breakup or, moving to a new school, or, anything can really disrupt the norm of a teenager's life. Big or small in our eyes, but when it disrupts their lives, it's going to cause questions related to identity, belonging, and purpose. And so being aware that those are going to happen, and being kind of prepared to catch that, and especially just to kind of listen and allow the disruption to happen and to be addressed. I thought it was just a great word. It didn't make it sound so heavy, like it's not something that's going to destroy or end things, but it is. It's a disruption from the normal that you have to work through, and that's kind of the goal was that it's not something that's going to derail, but it is something that's going to disrupt. And how do you move forward with it? Not be put off by it.
Right, or avoid it, right? Don't avoid it, address it. It is a gift, right? Which is kind of weird to think about.
Yeah.
But you see it certainly in scripture that like disruptions can be gifts because of the growth that's possible through them. And again, to not misuse the language of scripture of God won't give you anything you can't handle, or that God will bring you through it, right?
Yeah.
That kind of idea. It's not so much that God gives us certain disruptions for a purpose, but only the promise that God will use whatever it is that happens to us, right? Because a lot of times the disruptions we're talking about, and I appreciate it, the chapter addressing, there's certain things that are just heavy that we hope never happens to anyone, right? Those kind of traumas or disruptions. But the recognition of God still works through brokenness, okay? Doesn't cause brokenness, but works through it. Sin causes brokenness, all these other things. And so I appreciate it, like early on, it says that disruption can be a powerful catalyst for change. And Melanie, I appreciate how you were bringing in, because they were doing it. It was just my brain these days is going all over the place. So I didn't catch until later in the chapter of particularly highlighting how in these times, it's going to help us address issues of identity, belonging, and purpose. That's why they bring it in, because that's the 3 big questions.
Right.
And so how much we think about it, right? You even mentioned like small disruptions, how they can change how I understand anything.
Yeah.
Right? So like even and the pandemic was a big disruption, but not getting a certain graduation, not getting a prom, not getting all these other things. Sports teams stopping, school stopping, friends, the places where you did belong stopping. Like it all became a thing. So moving, right? Moving can be a direction and things like that we go. And so that's going to change all three of those questions when we have any kind of transition or disruption and things like that. So I found that to be like really, really helpful. And I appreciated another illustration they gave to us. They said instability, right, which is another word they use for disruption, can be a greenhouse for growth in identity, belonging, and purpose. And I thought that was so cool that this is an opportunity when disruption comes our way. And just to go back and echo a lot of what Fuller Youth Institute has said, to sit on the curb of their life with them, celebrating their joys and their sorrows all at the same time, and just listening.
And I liked that it said that it just continued that picture for us, that word picture of disruptions till the soil. They transplant us maybe altogether into a different garden so that young people learn to put down new roots, sprout new branches, and eventually produce a harvest. So it's good. Like, when you reframe it, something that disrupts the norm is actually creating an environment where there can be new growth, new strength, and the new harvest. That's just a much better lens to put on it if you can, and not everything is going to be pretty, and not everything is going to be understood as this is a disruption that's a garden that's supposed to help me grow and produce a harvest. Like, not everything is going to be understood with that lens. But if we as the adults can walk alongside and say, okay, this might not be a comfortable situation because you're encountering, let's say, death for the first time.
Yes.
But it's not going to be the last time. So in this process, how can we face it together? How can we understand, who we are, what we're called to be, what we're called to do, who Jesus is to us in this time, so that as we continue to walk through life, we have strength in Him, knowing that this is not going to be the one and only time that we experience this kind of disruption.
Yeah, and acknowledging for our kids that these disruptions, these roadblocks are going to happen.
Yeah.
And we move past them, but we have to get through them to do it. And for us as leaders and parents to not try to solve it all and make it a smooth
There's
path
a really good
for
quote
them.
toward the end that we'll get to.
That was kind of the big thing for me, was remembering. And I've learned as my children have grown that sometimes part of me walking with them is, I've got to take a step back.
Yeah.
And definitely not walk in front of them.
Yes.
I need to be beside them and sometimes even a little bit behind them.
Yeah.
Kind of to be there to catch them, but not doing it all for them.
Yeah, it says we don't get to escape them. We have to find our way through. We may want to protect our kids from all kinds of struggles, but we can't. And even if we could, we would be hindering them from the growth that they need.
Yep.
And that speaks to that whole like
Lawnmower parenting, helicopter parenting.
Yeah. And then the mama bear, which is a natural response to have. I think Papa Bear too. Like you want to, but
my kids are hurting. I don't want to see that.
And I think it's natural. Yeah. And even as leaders in the church, right? We don't want to see, we feel when someone else is feeling, you have that empathy and you want to try to take it away for them. And you know what? Growth can't happen when everything is.
And we don't have to, we don't have a God who's afraid of emotions.
Nope.
And we have a God who is empathetic with, he has solidarity with us.
Absolutely.
So, for us to try and plaster over it is not allowing people to experience the fullness of life with Jesus in the midst of our brokenness.
Yep.
I think there's also this fear, though, of anybody that walks alongside of a young person, of doing it wrong or being wrong or saying the wrong thing. And again, fear is the right word. And that's why I would bring in like the Martin Luther idea of sin boldly. You're going to mess up. You're a human being, Now, it doesn't mean you mess up intentionally, you don't give in to anger and all this other stuff. And when you do, you have the beautiful opportunity to repent, right? Even to your own kids. I got angry.
Oh, yeah.
That's not okay.
Yep.
I'm confessing that to you now. But like you're going to mess up, do your best, absolutely. But this pressure to pave the way or fix it. And the quote that came to mind when I was going, page 247 of this, Dr. Cynthia Erickson, a trauma specialist in Fuller's School of Psychology and Marriage and Family Therapy, offers some suggestions. This is what she says as you journey through people experiencing post-traumatic stress. And I'll pause there even as I do that, because that word trauma can be so interesting because it can be used by teenagers when it's not trauma. That was traumatic and things like that. And even when a teenager would misuse that word, I think what Dr. Erickson says can be applied to a situation. But maybe we'll get to that if we feel like we need to a little bit later on. But she says, we need to let them express whatever is going on in their minds in terms of their relationship with God. Our pastoral and parental tendency is to come in with some sort of answer to help them not doubt anymore. However, the most important first step is to be heard, even if what needs to be said are horrible thoughts towards God. Let go of the need to be a theological educator and stay in the moment in a pastoral place with a young person. Acknowledge that it's often hard to see God in the midst of those experiences. And earlier on, too, I thought it was so great that it kind of pointed out, especially right after something bad happens. Like, I would say parents in general, I was going to say I think I see dads do it more than most, right? But there's a want to, I need to fix this. This is unnecessary. Let's get this over with. That someone is sharing, a kid is sharing with you something that has affected them in a negative way. And they're exaggerating it, okay? And it's obvious to anyone who's listening, they're exaggerating what happened. That's not actually what happened and things like that. And so the tendency is to nix it, to stop it.
Shut it down.
To shut it down, to say, look, that's not what happened. Let's really look at this. Now, what that's communicating to your kid is, oh, when I'm feeling this emotion, I'm not going to be heard by whoever it is that's shutting this down by me. So, and I really appreciated that, because sometimes it is an exaggeration. And then I've also walked through with families that sometimes there is something significant, something very serious that is going on that is being dismissed as simple or something like that. And it's not being heard or addressed. And so it's so important, because you let them, whatever their perception is, let them share it, listen to it, ask questions about it, get the fullness of it. And then in time, allow time to do what it does and talk about the fullness of what it is and go back to the reality. Don't jump to that.
Yeah.
I think one of the things that part of my outside perspective, I think in America, we haven't had a significant disruption in lives in the last 80, 90 years since World War II, where you have lost like months or years, from a normalcy. Yes, we had 9/11. Yes, we had other events, civil rights moments, but it wasn't a national disruption as the pandemic was, which is a rare thing, because in most parts of the world, like where I grew up, I lost 2 years during one civil war. I lost a year during another civil war. I lost 6 months during a genocide. So disruptions are part of how you survive, persevere through life. And so you then, I think, speaking for myself, you start to view the cycles of life or the rhythms of life with the expectations of those disruptions, knowing that you've been prepared to handle what's coming ahead.
Yeah.
And in a lot of ways, I found that to be a struggle in our inner international relationship I have with my wife, because she comes from an American perspective of wanting to protect the child, and I came from a worldview where I'm like, no, I want them to struggle. I want them to deal with this stuff because that's the only way I felt they could survive. I didn't want to provide them with a soft landing. And so we had a lot of early on conversations as a nurturing person, as a mother, and me, going back to that fixing. I wasn't necessarily trying to fix my kids. I just wanted them to learn grit the hard way. Because I didn't think that just by the normalcy of the life that they were going to get that. There had to be disruptions. Now, I wasn't going to create a disruption necessarily, but I wasn't also there to be overly protective when something happened. Rather, I was like, great. Now, how can we use this situation for my 3 boys to wrestle with, because I cannot give them my experience. I can't tell them this is how to navigate through life. They have to walk through it themselves. They have to struggle through it. They have to be wanting to, and I think that's ultimately the faith question, right? When someone asks me, why do I believe in Jesus? To me, I am rescued over and over and over again through the struggles and disruptions of my life.
Mm.
And it's Jesus that walks with me through those moments. I think we do a disservice to our students and our kids when we want to step in that and be Jesus.
Yeah.
It's got to
Yeah.
be Jesus. They have to know that we are temporary and he's eternal.
Mm.
And that's when they can seek him
Yeah.
because there's no one else to fall. And I feel like that's one of my biggest struggles in walking with students in the United States, as I worked in youth ministry the last 20 plus years, is parents want to be there to catch them. And I'm like, no, you got a Lord and a Savior that's
Right.
got it.
Well, and that's the invitation of this chapter,
Yes.
right? Exactly
Right.
what you're describing and what you hope to do with your boys. That's exactly what the chapter is trying to get out there. And I appreciate the chapter because it gives you the tools. It
Yeah.
equips you with
Mhm.
questions to ask. Because it's so funny because again, how many echoes we've seen in the different books that we've read, especially Sticky Faith, right? Which makes sense. Same folks kind of pulled this together. But you have this tool of like things that I saw with like Love and Logic and things like that of tell me more, I wonder, all these being curious questions, that you can ask rather than just trying to jump in. And it to me at least, like and I know some people are like, y'all are beating a dead horse. And I was like, and some of you guys are like, oh, this is great stuff. But like to me, I'm going, just look at your own life.
Mm-hmm.
Like how much have you appreciated someone just coming in and you share something and they just want to fix it for you? How much have you appreciated? You know what I mean? It's like, oh, thank you.
Especially those people who are married at the beginning.
But it's kind of like, no, thank you for knowing more about my life than I do. And know that you're a young person, no matter how young they are. Now, granted, like it's that dance that you do as your kid grows too.
Yeah.
I mean, because I find that, yes, in elementary school, there's a lot of they need to learn the rules. They need to know how to be safe and things like that. You need to exercise all this stuff. And to some degree, like moralism works, like be good, not bad. And at the same time, this adolescent journey can find strength if you get those elementary school years in a place where you're communicating in a way that's healthy. So you allow them to be heard, right? Rather than just shutting it down because it's not true or it's whatever. Allow them to learn what it means to express and communicate even at that young age. And truly, what does it take? It takes patience.
Yep.
It takes time. And at the end of the day, God has entrusted these young people to you. And you have to sacrifice yourself as a parent in this time in order to do what God expects you to do for whatever child he's given to you, right? So it's hard, right? Sacrifice is hard.
And I think I should say, you will make mistakes and it's okay.
100%.
Because yes, we know what the expectation is and what God has entrusted us with and what our role is with our kids. But along the way, we are going to make mistakes. We're going to be impatient.
Oh, yeah.
We're going to be like, okay, this one, I just got to solve for you. We just got to get this out of the way.
Yeah.
And those mistakes do not have to define your life or your child's life.
No, but I think when you look at the grand scheme of things, I love when Uma said, we try to be Jesus. And when I look back with my kids, I'm like, oh my goodness, yes, I never thought about it like that. But that's absolutely it. But as my children have gotten older, and I think doing these 3 books has been huge.
Right.
For as my daughters, having a freshman and a senior in high school and the way that we communicate and the way that I talk to them. And I'm like, okay, you know what? They are ready to start tackling some of these big issues on their own. And I love that in these questions that they give us, in these conversation starters that you have, it always starts with, tell me how you're feeling.
Yep.
You know, I'm listening, letting them say whatever it is and not stopping them. And then it's, what can I do? What do you need? Not necessarily about me doing, but what do you need right now? What do you
Absolutely.
think would be helpful
Well,
now?
and just
So
another
that
reason
it's-
why people need
Yeah.
to buy this book. I mean, because it's and again, that's not the goal of the podcast. It's not to sell a bunch
No.
of books, but the resources that are found here. And again, remind ourselves earlier in the season where Kara talked about like I would take the book with me and the kids would make fun of me but it's
Yeah.
like this. There's so many resources, and even an extra, which we won't get into. There's a whole 200 something questions at the back of the book to continue conversations. But like, and I see you're open to the same page, Melanie.
Yeah.
Like this section about how painful experiences can open doors to some of the best conversations. And I can
Yes.
say in student ministry, that is 100%
So
true in life, right?
Yeah.
It's when things hurt, when things aren't perfect, when things aren't normal, that you get the depth of this spiritual experience of really learning what it means to trust God and let Him lead. So it's like, okay, just look at some of these questions, and then the now God how, which I appreciate that framework,
Yes.
right? Tell me what happened. Just simply there, tell me what happened. Tell me more. All these things, give them that time, again, not cutting them short. And I love number 4 because we assume the answer to this question in so many respects to life. And maybe I'm speaking for myself, I don't know, but I think we all do this. What do you think you need right now? Right? Instead of me assuming what you need, let me ask.
Yep.
What do you need right now? Those are some of my favorites in the now. Look, I looked at the God one. A question, right? Not an assertion. Where is God in the midst of this?
Yeah.
Does it seem like God is active? Is He silent? Is He unavailable? Is He not listening? Or is He very present with you? Right? It's a question. You can't assume. You like that. That is a very personal experience. I love number 6. What do you think God thinks or feels about this situation? Right? Just what do you think God thinks? And there's very well, trust me, there's going to be that. I don't know. All right, out of frustration. That's okay.
Yeah.
Man, that's a tough spot to maybe not be able to know or not be able to understand what God, and be able to repeat back the whole active listening. And then I appreciate it 8 and 9, which is in the how.
Yeah.
What kind of help do you want?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
I can keep listening and help you think about some next steps, or we can pause for now and pick this up another time.
Love that.
And then I loved a little later on, it was like, when do you think we can talk about this next? And then 9, who else can you talk to about this?
Yeah.
Right. I love it because it's all just a bunch of invitations. This is why I love questions. Like I think they're so helpful in actually trying to understand someone, actually trying to see someone, be aware of it. I don't know if y'all had other ones that stood out in that section that were beautiful for you or what.
Well, I've been starting to apply some of this, like just giving my kids a little bit more agency at ages 7 and 5, you know, and some of it's like, they come out of their room for the 4th time at night and they, Mommy, my finger itches, and I'm just like, oh man, yeah, that's tough. Well, what do you think you need? And I need a Band-Aid. All right, we can do that.
There you
That's
go.
done.
Yeah.
Instead of, no, it doesn't itch. You just want to come out of your room. Like trying to fix or trying to assume. It's more of the, Mommy, I don't want to go to school. Oh, really? Yeah, tell me more about that. And oh man, yeah, that sounds tough. And well, what can I do to help? What do you think would be what do you think would help you feel better right now? And it just gets them thinking, lets them know I'm listening, and it sets the groundwork for all of these other conversations when things come down the line.
That's awesome.
Just fight the urge to solve a problem and ask a question first. Like fight the urge to solve a problem and ask them what they're thinking, what they're feeling. I just love these questions. There's just so much there that plants. Well, maybe I think about the relationship bank account, where you're putting in deposits into the relationship bank account. And in the journey of parenting, you're hopefully, your goal is over time to release a fully functioning adult out into the world who knows themselves, who knows the world, who understands who they are and where they belong and all these, questions. Well, we have to gradually do that. So we need to be making deposits in that relationship bank account, helping them to, get their sense of agency and self-awareness and giving them opportunity to share their voice. So yeah, little tiny things, oh, I'm mad. Tell me more about that. Let them express their feelings, listen. What do you think you should do?
Yeah.
What are some ideas you have? Do you want some ideas from me? Are you, would you like to take a break from talking about this right now? All good stuff.
Yeah, I love that because the thing that they say is don't jump into that problem solving mode immediately, right? Sometimes, I mean, we have to sit in our feelings and in our, situations for a little while before we can start to process and think about our next steps. Our kids are no different than us. As adults, we tend to look and go, oh, I've done that before, so let me tell you what you should do, instead of allowing them to sit there and not try to solve every problem immediately, and wait for them to, let me know when you're ready for me, if you need me to do something. Let me know if you just need me to listen.
Yep.
And sometimes it's just about planting seeds. It goes back to the relationship bank. Because as we're talking through this, what's coming to mind is how many different conversations where I knew there was something going on, but I couldn't get it out of a kid, right?
Yeah.
So like whether it's a teacher saying, hey, something's going on, we need to talk about this. And as much as you want to reiterate, hey, this is a safe place, like for me, right, my pastoral vows, I can't share as long as there's no harm coming to you or someone else.
Right.
As much as there's stuff going on, like I actually wonder if the next time one of those conversations happen, I'm just going to grab this book, right?
Yeah.
Because there's so much depth, there's hurt, they're human beings, they've gone through stuff, but it's like, it's so hard to get them to actually open up and say something, which like, and why do we want that? Like, cause it's funny actually, is I'm kind of reflecting out loud. I think a lot of times it can be seen as like, oh, they just want to know all my stuff. And I'm like, actually, no. Like, I want you to open up to any trusted adult in your life.
Yeah.
I was like, and even when a kid comes to me for some sort of counseling and there's something, especially something significant that happened, I always tell them the goal is to get to the point that they'll tell their parents, right? That's always the goal, to build toward that, because that's why God gave you parents, is so they could walk alongside of you in that way. And they're always going to be there for you. And so that's the thing, is like talking to anyone about any of this stuff and really being able to communicate is where that healing comes,
I think part of it too is that the reluctancy that I sense in young people to share with a safe adult is twofold. I think one is because they haven't really been modeled that. Maybe,
absolutely. Well, because the question is, are they really safe?
Exactly.
These adults know each other. They know my parents. They're going to tell everybody.
And two, they may have given a little bits and tested the waters and found that,
yes,
because I know kids always are trying to seek someone. And I've seen little bits and pieces, and then you can see, okay, there's more to it, right? But there are times where I think they get burned by that, especially in their own peer group, because sometimes I think they want to go to the peer group to get that sort
which
of
is
validation.
Terrifying.
Right, absolutely.
Blind leading the blind.
Pretty much.
Yeah. Broke,
and we're not any better either as adults, but we have some experiences.
Exactly. Versus these, I mean, seriously, it's like going to someone broke for financial advice. Like when you're asking for life experience from a teenager. It's kind of like, and I love teenagers and I love the advice that they can give us and the wisdom.
Yeah.
I don't want to dismiss that at all. It's just kind of like sometimes they take very serious things like suicidal thoughts or trying to solve relational issues. And I agree that they've been burned because like wearing that pastor hat, like people have been burned by pastors in the past.
Yeah.
So it's really hard for them to breach any level of trust with a professional church worker because they've been burned by the church or church people or things like that. It's so fascinating.
Well, and I think where Melanie was talking about filling that wallet, right? We've got, before a child is going to trust you with something that's important to them, you've got to have a relationship with them. I think it all comes back to relationships. And even our own children, we can't just assume, they live in my house, so they're going to tell me everything that happens. Yeah. No, you need to start from early on, allowing them to know that, hey, you know what, I love you and you're going to make mistakes and it's okay.
Yeah.
Bad things are going to happen and it's okay.
Yeah.
You're going to do bad things. It's okay. There are other consequences, absolutely, but let's work through them and let's go through them together. And even our kids in ministry, right? Like you said, they're testing the waters. We've got to build relationships, and they're going to start with those little bitty things that are trivial to us and we probably don't even realize.
Right.
Yep.
But it's a big deal. It's a big deal to them. Yeah.
But if we don't have a relationship with those kids, then they're not going to share with us, no matter what role we are in their lives.
And relationships are founded on listening.
Yes.
Mm.
And that's what I love
there's-
about this book. It's all about, you've got to start with the listening part.
Ask the questions, listen to the answers without judgment, ask follow-up questions, keep on listening.
And this lesson is one that like hits me in the face every single time, right? So I go back to like a big saying at Full Youth Institute is leadership begins with listening. And as I've shared on the podcast before, I believe you could say love begins with listening. This is ultimately about loving people that are right in front of you.
Yep.
And when you don't feel heard, when you don't feel listened to, you don't feel loved. And I can tell you, like, we're certainly in a season of transition. I'm sure that will be true when this podcast is released too. And it's so tempting. And I speak specifically from my point of view, but I think it's so tempting at any person's life with the pace that we live in to go and go and go, to get distracted by what needs to be done, the grocery shopping, the schedules, the sports, the school, the work requirements, the communication, the email that needs to be sent, the text that you just got, the social media notification. What does that mean? Like, as I say that, some people listening probably just got stressed.
Yep.
And I'm sitting here going, like, this is why God said, stop, pause, rest, listen to me, learn from me every single day. And I can speak honestly, like that is a place where I continue to need growth every single day of my life, learning what it means to stop, even though, again, responsibilities are a little higher and there's more to be done. And I would say, I know what would help me, and so I would assume it would help everyone else too, is, hey, can we have a little grace with each other?
Yep.
Can we acknowledge that none of us are going to get everything done that we want to get done? None of us are going to have the time that we think we're going to have to get all these things, and to be patient with each other and enjoy the moment and enjoy life together.
Yeah.
Right? I think that's what it's going to take. And that goes for your kids.
Oh, yeah.
Like, and so it's funny when you see a kid stressed out about a final or stressed out about a test, and maybe they've overcommitted themselves in the meantime. And I've tried to say, like, hey, when's that test? It's on Tuesday. What happens if you never take that test? Well, then, blah, 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 blah. No. Let's just say Wednesday. Wednesday, you accidentally overslept the whole day. And then Wednesday shows up, what happens? Are you still alive? Yeah. Do you still have this person, these people that care about you? Yeah. Does your world actually end if you don't take that test? No, I guess not. You know what I mean? And granted, that's a really quick way to have that conversation. But it's that at the end of the day, your teachers understand that too. You know what I mean? So I don't blame a parent one bit when they say we're going to take a mental health day.
Yep.
Because especially in this day and age, we've come to recognize how important that kind of a thing is. Yeah, that might cause a little bit of stress afterward. There's work to be done.
Yep.
There's things to be learned and stuff like that. Like, as I only get to teach one period a day, but like, yeah, you still got to make up the work, and there's still going to be a quiz. There's still going to be a test. We'll work it out. We'll figure it out in our own time. But like, it's okay to take a break. It's okay to pause and to have grace with our kids, our students.
I think that's one of the biggest lessons I learned, and I'm grateful for, is as a coach, I've always allowed my athletes to have the freedom to say, Coach, I need a mental health day. I can't make it to practice. I don't want to have no excuses, whatever, but I need a day to get and just to see that empowerment. Yeah, go take care of yourself. Come when you're ready. I find my athletes are far better prepared for the rigors than if they were trying to make an excuse to me and say, I'm going to miss practice. Because then there's resentment from the team. There's like, this person didn't show up. But if you can continue to empower students to say, yes, today's a tough day. Today I want to be wallowing in my pain, for lack of a better word. And it may seem like wallowing, but I think there's opportunities where they can process and maybe figure out ways to which they can then move to the next stage that they need to in that.
And I think this connects. 247 talked about it's important to take a break when experiencing certain things, and a break not just from scheduling, but a break from the news, a break from the social media, things like that. So it said it was the advice of the chapter: be attentive for signs of post-traumatic stress, which include feeling hopeless, numb, on guard, or scared, increased mood swings, having trouble sleeping or eating, acting out, or other physical distress. So all signs of potential trauma, which is as troubling as that is, as hurtful as it feels to think my kid could have possibly experienced trauma in some way or another from something. It's so important to watch and listen for those things so that you can do something, right? And because it says, if you're experiencing, start encouraging them, because it's talking about, at this point too, this is important to preface, when there's just violence, which we've seen in the world, violence due to war, violence due to
something happening
shootings,
in a school,
racial tensions and shootings of Black men and things like that. Like, so it's really important when those things are there, that could be causing trauma for some of our students too. And they have excellent questions. Another great section. So another great set of, so chapter 10, questions when they're experiencing violence in their community. And sometimes that's in the world, sometimes that's in our immediate community. Like, good questions like, what do you know about what happened? What did you experience? You know, how did you find out? Things like that. Tell me more. I wonder. How have you sensed God through this experience? What questions are you wrestling with? I loved that.
Yeah.
Like, what are you asking yourself? Why is it causing this trauma? So that then you can start to deal with it. And that's what, but anytime you see that is God triggering you. You need to stop whatever you think is important right now to go and talk to your kid or figure out what's going on and say, hey, I've noticed, you know, you're not eating like you used to.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes we have to be careful with the trauma because sometimes we think it has to be like this big, huge event that causes our kids trauma when it could be something that we look at and are like, that's not such a big deal.
100%.
But to that individual person, it really
moment.
is a traumatic experience that changes things. I mean, we've lived through this with kids that we know. And it's, you know, it's a big deal when, you know, you can look back and be like, well, when I was younger, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
But today and the way it affects that one individual person. So I think we have to be careful with trauma to not say, oh, well, that wasn't a big deal.
And I'll give our listeners a little, I'm gonna do something. If you have little ears listening, you're gonna want to pause or turn down the volume just to talk about this specific one with experiences that I have. But Melanie, you were gonna say something first.
Go ahead.
Oh no, you go ahead. So they have time to like pause and turn down volume.
I was just gonna say, like, with access to media, things that maybe were a blip on our radar may be cycling through to our teens, especially constantly, and it may be causing it like. Over the span of time, it may be causing trauma because of a length of exposure rather than it being a singular incident that we think is one and done. So yeah, trauma can come in a lot of different forms and their access to media, and this doesn't mean you go shut it down and take their phone away, but it does mean that you say, hey, is your time here helping you to feel calmer and more peaceful, or is it causing you stress and anxiety?
Yeah, and I just think we have to be careful too. Just make sure that we're not downplaying those kids' feelings.
Absolutely.
I think that's huge for them.
Yep.
So it connects, right? So again, little ears listening, you want to turn down the volume or pause and listen another time. But anytime like the topic of sex comes up, I mean, and so especially thinking of phones, what I've seen a lot of times, especially where parents will dismiss, is with some sort of phrase of like, boys will be boys or girls will be girls. And so it's often, especially in like the elementary school years, a child will have a sexual experience, and all that means is, right, there's touching, or they see something that they shouldn't have seen, or there's some sort of sexual encounter, even amongst kids, right? Of if they touch the no place and things like that, that is actually traumatic.
Yes.
And I have seen over and over again where parents, like the kid will come and talk to me years later, 10 years later, 12 years later, 15 years later, and they won't have realized how defining that experience was for them. And then you go to talk to the parents. You finally get the kid to the place that they'll talk to parents. And it's, that
wasn't a big deal.
Why is that a big deal?
Yeah.
You know, so even the whole boys will be girls. And so again, like it's not, they don't necessarily need counseling right away. It's just listen, you know, just recognize the importance of any sexual encounter is definitive because God designed our bodies a certain way, right? To respond certain ways to certain things, so that when that time comes for marriage, it's a beautiful experience. But until then, there's so many different things. And the same thing is true of phones and things like that. So like that's the hard topic out of the way. But phones and like how easy it is for them to search whatever they want to see.
Oh my goodness,
And they're
or
bombarded.
to accidentally
they're
come across it. Exactly. And so
it's not just phones. You can't even watch TV.
Oh, absolutely.
You can't watch
Commercial.
football without seeing things.
If you go
that
to
I'm
New
like,
Orleans, you can't
really?
walk down the street.
Yeah.
But like you gotta watch yourself as a parent. How am I responding? What is the message they are receiving, and how I respond to this? Am I being dismissive? Am I being judgmental? Am I being scared? Am I all this other stuff? Or am I helping them process what happened? And guys, reach out for help when that happens.
Oh, yes. Yep.
Yeah, we're not meant to do that alone.
And it's a fine line to walk, because on some levels, that there's plenty of things out there that your kids might not be developmentally ready for. And so we're not talking about flinging the doors wide open and anything goes, nor are we talking about batten down the hatches and get back in the submarine. That was, one of the pictures from a previous book was like getting into a submarine and locking down our family and, preventing anything from coming in. So how do you set up your kids to be able to ask questions about sensitive topics?
Yes.
And that's, another theme that we've talked about before. So how do you have a relationship that's open enough with your kids where they can and will come to you with questions about what they see? We're seeing the stats continue to go down. A couple years ago, the stat was that at the age of 11, that'll be the average child's first exposure to pornography.
Oh, I'm amazed it's 11.
8, I'm pretty sure
I was
now.
about to say,
It's gone down
say, yeah.
significantly,
Absolutely.
even in the past few years. So this is going to happen again. And so what do we do to make sure that our kids can come to us comfortably, by making sure we're not shutting things down, by making sure we're also not dismissing things that they want to talk about because we're unsure of how to handle it. This is a great thing for, that is an important thing to talk about.
Oh, yeah.
Can we set aside a time to talk about that? Because I want to hear your questions. I'm not ready to talk about it today, but how about Tuesday?
When will work?
When will work?
And before anybody's sitting there going like, oh gosh, what has Pastor Lee experienced as a pastor? I was like, no, I've been working with kids since I was 15 years old. So for the last 18 years, I've seen exactly what I talked about in multiple different settings of ministry. And it is so fascinating to see it. And it's hard. It's really, really hard for parents. Trust me, like it's really, really hard to wrap your mind around that something could have gone wrong, especially in that department, because it's such a shameful topic a lot of times. And I think it's unnecessarily shameful to talk about it, because I think it is something that happens. But that's true. I tell people all the time, my default mode is it is what it is, right? And we deal with what is. We can't change the past. We can only deal with the present and talk about the future. And I think that's the direction this chapter helps us to go to.
And they give you the tools to start doing that with these conversations that are in here. So when you're at a loss and you're like, I have no idea what I was supposed to say when my kid says that.
Yeah.
Or, and granted, you can always go to your kid's youth pastor. You can go to
exactly.
You're not alone. Parents are not alone either, right? I mean, our kids are not alone and we want them to come to us, but we also need to know that there are places we can go to ask for help.
And it's important to have some training involved, right? I think sometimes when you're like, I can think back when I was just the counselor or when I was the college student and just had certain experiences, you tell yourself you have all this experience. It's like, no, you need training. You need training. You don't just need experience. You need to be able to talk to some professionals. And I'll do that in counseling. I will tell everyone that comes to me for any kind of a counseling or conversation, I am trained in spiritual counseling. I can talk about how the Spirit's moving and things like that and questions that God might be placing on your heart. I'm not a mental health counselor.
Yeah.
Like as much as I might satisfy a need for you, I don't have specialized training for that. And so there's very well that we could talk about places that you can go to talk about those things. And so it's just important to acknowledge those things. So every single one of these has those components. There's a spiritual component to what's going on, and there is a mental health component to what's going on, even in those unwanted sexual encounters. And so that's the thing is I can talk to you about the spiritual side of things and what's going on, but I can't talk to you about the mental health side. I would love to. I just don't have that training.
Yeah.
And I love where the chapter goes, though, too, because it brings back up something I know we've talked about before, is this biblical gift that God gives to us, an understanding of lament.
Mm-hmm.
Because we are in a culture that avoids sorrow, wants just only positive. Why are you so negative? I've had that before. We're going to tell you all these things about our loved one, but you don't have to share those. Don't do that. It's like, why not? You know, they struggled and God brought them through that and still kept some faith. That is what we call a testimony, friends.
Yeah.
So it's like this gift of lament, though, that you see in the Psalms. And y'all, what resources on those pages, those short pages of talking about this idea of what do we do with our sorrows, and how the Psalms in particular and other places in Scripture give us words for what to say and how challenged we feel in those times, and questions like, how long, Lord, right?
Yeah.
We ask that question. So do the Scriptures. Help me, answer me. And then the turn, right? The very important turn of a lament, yet I will trust you.
Yeah.
This idea of, I love the current religion section I teach, because I turn to the Psalms. I didn't get to this past quarter because the schedule is just mean. But we didn't get to spend as much time as I want to with the Psalms, so I'll probably pick it up fourth quarter so everybody's on the same page. But the Psalms give us words when we don't have them.
Yep.
You know, it's kind of like music, which I appreciate the suggestion of. Just think about how you like to listen to sad songs when you're sad, right? That's the way the Psalms operate. In other places in Scripture, they're going to give you words to match those emotions when you don't have them. And it's just a beautiful thing that God can do with that. And the important thing of the Psalms is, with those sorrows, with those doubts, with whatever's going on in the circumstances, where do they go?
Yeah.
They go to God.
Yep.
Because I think what we do is we go into our hiding place, we go to our rooms, we go to our offices, wherever it is. The closet is a closet. Yeah. I've heard the bathroom for moms. Yeah. Like they're not going to bug mom in the bathroom.
Yeah.
But like,
they do.
They can find you.
But that's the tendency, is to go there, and God's invitation is for us to go to Him with whatever it is. And the Psalms give us some words. So just some cool suggestions and exact places in Scriptures to go in the final places of this chapter. They mentioned Psalm 88. It's one of my favorite places to go if you're feeling down. You want to hear words of sorrow that match yours, go to Psalm 88.
Yep.
And I still remember vividly standing in Caiaphas's house, or where we understand it to be in Israel, and they have a pit that they would have thrown Jesus down into. And what is the psalm that they have opened up at the bottom of that pit? It's Psalm 88. And their point is basically Jesus being thrown into this pit, he would have known the Scriptures, and that would very well have been the words on his mind in that experience of, all my friends abandoning me, I'm deep down in the pit. And there's not a hopeful tone at the end.
No.
It's just that it's a prayer to God when you're feeling at your lowest of lows. And so it's just really cool to see them bring that out and then to point other places of Scripture with it.
Because faith and lament are not mutually exclusive.
Yes.
You can, I love in the Gospel of Mark, Lord, I believe, help me in my unbelief. I'm holding both of these two things in tension. I'm holding these questions of how can God be good, and yet I'm trusting the promise that God is good all the time. And that allowing those, earlier in the chapter when it said your kids might want to say horrible things about God.
It's okay.
Yeah.
Okay, they need to be able to express that and know that God is still good. And to be able to see other examples of people who expressed similar thoughts and ultimately did find God to be good and did find redemption to be true for them in the midst of this devastating thing that they encountered.
If it's in there, say it.
Yeah.
Right? If it's inside, say it. Right? Now, and again, we try and be as respectful as we possibly can in everything that we do. But God's invitation is just to say it. Get it out. That's why He brings us into community.
Yep.
That's why by design, as humans, we crave community. Even if we're extreme introverts, we don't love being completely alone. We need to be able to talk and walk through things. So that's what I really appreciated, is there is a way, there's a tool that God gives to us to get through struggle and live in it, thrive in it a little bit, right? Grow from it. And the idea of the Scriptures, again, iron sharpens iron. And they kind of conclude the chapter then with this idea of saying yes to Jesus in our struggles. I think the language I'm using is letting Jesus lead in the struggles. So being able to turn to Jesus and say, what do I do with this? What would you have me do? What would you have me say? And also just the invitation of, this whole book to me, and certainly the journey of this podcast that we've been on, is an invitation to see and to hear and to listen to the loved one that God is placing in front of you. And that's every person. It's not just really people related by blood, but people that every person, but especially your young people in your life, to see them, to listen to them, to hear them. And again, it's a growth point for me. I have to continue to learn what that means every day of my life.
Well, and at the very end of the chapter, their kind of call to us is to keep listening, keep paying attention to those teenagers in our lives. And I think we, as leaders, as parents, as mentors, we get caught up in our own stuff.
So much.
And we forget to pay attention fully to what's happening to our kids. And we aren't always listening with both ears. We've got one on something else, and we're not fully paying attention to them. And I think that's huge.
Yeah.
As I say, keep hearing the conversations. Something that goes through my mind is, because I believe in everything that's being shared, but I want to add a caveat to it. As we lament and as we turn to Jesus, part of that turning to Jesus is also exposing our kiddos to not situation, but to others who have walked a harder life, harder journey. Because I think sometimes it can be all about me, right? And then we dwell in our space. And I love that the Psalms are there because we can walk alongside David or whoever the psalmist is in the lament, but then we understand that comes through because there's reference to Job or there's reference to others who have lamented even deeper. I think what I find is that when I want to sit and wallow in my own, I have to look at, and my neighbor's dealing with pancreatic cancer.
Sure. Oh, yeah. And
stuff like
there's
that.
There's a good country song about that. Yeah.
Because I think sometimes
Just been one of those days. That's the
I don't know
song.
about country song, but I think that's part of our, at least my calling is as we help students walk through their life and as we help our kids walk through their life, also expose them to others whose circumstances are far worse.
And not to shame.
No.
But to say, and yet they see God's faithfulness. And there's hope for us to also see God's faithfulness in our struggles.
Right. And that's where we can love our neighbor.
Yep.
I think that's a good qualifier, because I was about to caveat your caveat. Because I've walked through with students that in their families, they've seen this person's really struggling, this person's really struggling, this person's really struggling, in their own immediate families or even just briefly extended families. And what they learn is, my problems don't matter. My stuff's not heavy enough.
Yes.
Yeah.
So there's that. So I appreciate what you said there. And it brought the whole thing full circle of, you're going through a tough time. Whatever it is, I'm not dismissing, I'm not diminishing, I'm not trying to make it little. Let's learn from someone else who's gone through some tough times. So I appreciate that full circle spin to it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I want to point out one resource before we close out. It's just so parents know, if you don't have the book in front of you, haven't gotten it, there are some great things. Again, we talked about if there's, violence in the community, but there's a really good box about if your student knows someone who has attempted or committed suicide.
Yeah.
And I think that's a very timely one for this generation. And so again, we don't probably have time to get into it today, but know that there's a great resource box in the book there for some specific questions and what you can say without trying to fix, what you can say to be available, and what you can do to keep an eye on your kiddos and just walk with them as they deal with the major pain and struggle of, even if it's, not necessarily a close friend or anything, but just having that in their world somewhere, the experience of knowing someone that has attempted or committed suicide.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what I love this book. I love that they wanted to just place resources in the hands of people. Again, it's not a theoretical book.
No.
It is very much a
practical
in your hands. You can use it at any point. I need to remember to pick it up type thing.
Yep.
And so also recognize though that God's got people in your life.
Yep.
Like, and these people all have their own experiences and things like that. We're meant to do life together. We're meant to ask questions. And sometimes like there's a fear to really be vulnerable out there with people, but God invites us to that, especially in the communities that are surrounded by, or that surround him, that surround Jesus. When he's at the center of it, like we're placing our trust in him to be able to do things. And maybe that trust leads us to deeper prayers and other laments and things like that sometimes of, God, you have a very messy church that you surrounded me with. But still the invitation is there.
Yeah.
And y'all, that's season 3.
That's it. Wow. That's crazy.
Yeah. In the books. In the books. Get it? All right. So how exciting that is. As always, we're inviting our listeners to engage with us in the conversation, whether that's emailing us at raiseemup@trinityclimb.org or finding us on the Facebook. Maybe that's how you found us, or maybe you found us somewhere where you're listening to podcasts. By all means, if this helped at all, if there's anything, please share it with folks. Please ask questions of each other. Please have the conversations. That's what I appreciate. I've been hearing is just that people are talking about it.
Yeah.
So they might not be talking with us, but they're talking with each other about it. And that's all we could hope for, is just trying to throw a resource out there to help to keep these conversations going for the sake of the next generation and these young people in there. So we don't have in store what's next for season 4, but we will definitely promote that when that time comes. And we just enjoy that you guys chose to listen to us this long and to walk through us now for 3 seasons, which is pretty incredible. And this season, which was 10 episodes long. But please join the conversation. God bless you as you continue to walk alongside of whatever young people in your life. And know, yes, you're going to make mistakes, but God is highly capable of continuing to carry you and your kids and your students into the life that he has in front of you. So bless you guys. And again, thanks for listening.